Welcome, and thank you for taking the time today to join us for this webinar in celebration of the Grants Management Office 1-year anniversary. In fact, for those of you that remember, Governor Mark Gordon formally launched the Grants Management Initiative last July 8th, and we have learned so much from you all over the past year. A sincere thanks to all of you who have engaged with us, utilized our services, and continued to provide feedback to ensure we are providing a resource that was useful and valuable for you. But we aren't done yet, and we have a lot of ideas on how we can improve over the next year, but we will need your help to get that done. So today, as a part of our Wyoming Grants Assistance Program, or WYGAP, we are excited to focus on the Grants Management Office anniversary, along with a segment for project planning and best practices. For those of you who don't know me, I am Drew Palmer, Grants Integration Manager for Governor Gordon. Let me introduce our team. First, with the State Budget Department, we have Christine Emiger, who is the Administrator of the Grants Management Office, Diana Cabriales, who is the Deputy Administrator for the Grants Management Office, and a new team member has just joined us recently, Bob Eatman, who is a Senior Budget Analyst. And from our Haggerty team, who we cherish so much in the background, we have Rachel Knobloch, our Grant Administrator and Project Manager, Michelle Rogers, Grant Advisor, and Abby Trimmel in the background, who is a Program Consultant. And we have two very special guests with us today. First, we have the State Budget Director, Kevin Hibbard, with us and watching. So thank you for joining us today, Director, and thank you for all of your support over the past year. We also have a special guest with Jessica Lum-Williams, who is a Grants Manager for the PAL Economic Partnership, and we appreciate her time as well. Before we get started, let's review a few housekeeping items. This presentation will be recorded. Please keep your devices unmuted unless you are speaking. There will be time at the end of the presentation for questions. You are welcome to put your questions in the Q&A separate from the chat. Please raise your hand and we will call on you. And if we do call on you, we'd love to see your face if you put yourself, take yourself off of the screen. Please enter your name, title, and organization, and the local government or organization that you belong to in the chat. We will be posting the recording and the slide deck on our website at sbd.yo.gov/grants. So to begin, for those of you that are joining us for the first time, the Grants Management Office officially launched last summer. This resource, and it stood up in the State Budget Department. This resource is being stood up to assist state agencies, local governments, tribal organizations and governments, nonprofits, and small businesses to build capacity over time and provide additional resources to apply for federal and state grants. It is the expectation that this effort will assist in laying the foundation for a viable solution in meeting the technical assistance and resource needs of our communities long term. The overarching goal of the Grants Management Initiative is to create a one-stop shop for resources related to federal and state grant opportunities, and working to identify stacking and braiding options, including IRA or other tax credit programs and direct pay, to maximize benefits to the state and local communities. Today, our focus for this webinar is going to be that we will reflect on the Grants Management Office's impact in 1 year and what's ahead in year 2, recognize the project planning support services available at no cost to Wyoming communities, apply methods for taking a project from the conceptual stage to the planning stage, utilizing tools such as the Grants Management Office's project planning worksheet. And through the lens of a case study, follow a community's process for designing a project that is well positioned for grant funding. Before we begin, we want to recognize that there have been a few big milestones that have occurred recently, one being the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill by Congress just a few days ago. The Grants Management Office is continuing to digest and understand what programs were funded and what were cut, and how we will work with our federal partners to roll out those programs and determine eligibility criteria that will benefit Wyoming and our communities and businesses. Those programs will be updated in the Grants Connect Hub frequently, and we will work to provide timely information to you as to those program statuses. Additionally, the work that we have done and the relationships that we have built, created over the last 4 years with our federal partners, is critical moving forward in the upcoming months as we start to understand changes in federal programs. As a reminder for those that are not aware, the Grants Management Office hosts every other Thursday from 11 to 11:30 Mountain the Wyoming Grants Coordination bi-weekly meetings, previously known as the IWG. And if you are not on the distribution list for those meetings and would like to be, please contact us and we will share the virtual invite. It is open to everybody. We continue to coordinate closely with our delegation offices, in particular Senator Brasso and Senator Lummis, on changes to programs. We may not have all the answers that you are looking for right now regarding the budget bill changes, but we will work with you and provide resources to assist you to find those answers. I want to emphasize that the delegation, our governor, our federal partners, our state agencies, and certainly the Grants Management Office all stand ready to assist and provide you with the resources you need to be successful in your communities, nonprofits, and small businesses, which is what makes big, wonderful Wyoming the place we all want to live. So we've got a lot to share with you today. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Christine with the Grants Management Office to get us kicked off. Christine.
Hey, thanks, Drew. And thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. My name is Christine Eminger and I'm the administrator of the Grants Management Office. Real quickly, I'm sure that some of you have seen our organizational chart more than once, so I'm not going to bore you with all of the details. But the Grants Management Office is located in the State Budget Department, and our team works very closely with Drew Palmer in the governor's office to help support the governor's grants management initiative. And we are helping all of the eligible entities in Wyoming that would be able to apply for either state, federal, or private foundation grants. We are really excited to showcase some of the work that we have done over the past year, and we're excited to be able to present it to you today. Next slide, please. Over the past year, we have continued to refine our office goals. We keep them simple, short, and sweet. It helps us not overpromise and underdeliver. One of the first things is helping communities and organizations identify and pursue federal resources to support their priorities. We've said it once, we're not here to tell you what to do. We're really just here to give you the opportunities to find funding mechanisms and help you identify those funding mechanisms that align with those priorities. When it comes to your decision in choosing that priority, we are here to provide the technical assistance that is required for the entire range of activities associated with the grants management life cycle, from the time that we are helping you develop an application for submission to the time you're able to secure the award, all the way through the audit and the closeout process. And through that technical assistance, we are here to help build lasting capacity to plan for, pursue, and execute and manage grants. We understand that it is quite burdensome, and sometimes, the Grants Management Office has to step in and shoulder some of the burden, and we are more than happy to do so because it is at the benefit of our own Wyoming communities and our own grant writers and grant managers in those communities. Next slide, please. Over the last year, we have continued to look ourselves in the mirror. We look in the rear view mirror, we adjust as we go. We're still driving at 100 miles an hour. However, we have streamlined some of our services into 3 different buckets. One of them are the core support services, which includes today's webinar, any grant management tools or templates that we have available on our State Budget Department website. We also have group level support, training and support tailored to specific groups, something like the Wyoming Funding Summit, for example, or some of the tribal summits that we have helped prepare for. And then we get more focused into individualized support. Some individuals in Wyoming, they don't know where to go, how to start, and we are there to help kind of hold their hand and make sure that they have the information they need to make an informed decision and to move forward with that decision and to create traction. Next slide, please. We have our Wyoming Grant Assistance Program, and this was actually stood up last July 8th. We launched a webinar to help showcase some of the project planning support services that we have to offer, the grant readiness and research services, our grant writing support to help develop that narrative a little bit more for submission. And then one of our bigger areas that we've seen is post-award compliance support. Something that has been raised to us over the past year is regionalized grant training. And I am excited to be able to say today that we are looking at organizing our first regionalized grant training here in the state library. We're going to do a quick poll on that to see who might be interested in attending that. Give a couple seconds for everybody to say yes or no. Michelle or Abby, I'm gonna look to you to see if we have a vote on that. 92% said yes. Well, we're really excited because we really wanted to be able to provide this. There's been a lot of work that's been done in the last year, and I think that this is our next step as an office, is to help prepare and do these regionalized grant trainings. If you are interested in that, please do not hesitate to send an email to our sbd-grants@wyo.gov email address and use the subject title "Interest in Grant Training" so that we can help track and make sure that you get that information whenever it becomes available. The notification will be forthcoming on the State Budget Department website. And if you attend our bi-weekly grants coordination meetings that Drew spoke of, please know that we will also provide notification during that meeting as well. We also have another poll for you very quickly, and it has to do with if anyone has received or requested assistance from our grants management office. So we're going to put that poll up real quick. We'll wait about 30 seconds or so for people to be able to mark their vote, and then we will look to see what the results are. I'm going to look to Haggerty to bring those results up. No, 62% no, I have never requested or received technical assistance from the Grants Management Office. Well, I'm glad that you were able to join our webinar today. We're really excited because the next slide actually tells you how you are able to get in contact with us. Submitting a technical assistance request is very, very easy. We have a TA request form that you can fill out through our State Budget Department grants website. Or you can email us at sbd-grants@wyo.gov. And through that process, that is what initiates a technical assistance request and a response from our team. Usually we're averaging about 3 to 5 business days for a response during more heavy critical times. Say if we are preparing for the Wyoming Funding Summit again, we do try to be transparent about how long it takes for us to respond to one of these TA intake forms. However, if there is something that is a priority to you that you need our assistance with, please know that we will help you in any way that we can and be able to help build capacity through that to meet that request. We also wanted to let you know that since we do work in the State Budget Department, and we are located within the state library, we just wanted to remind everyone that but in-person meetings are available. However, they are by appointment. So if you are ever in Cheyenne, please give us a call and we can make sure that we get you on the schedule. We don't want to miss you, and we don't want to be somewhere else in Wyoming whenever you stop by the State Budget Department Grants Management Office. So give us a ring, send us an email, and we'll get you on the calendar, and you can chat with us in person. The other way that you are able to submit a technical assistance request is by calling 307-777 6292. And if you get to the voicemail, please leave one with your name and your phone number and a brief description of the problem or the request that you are seeking, and we will get back to you. And that is also another way to start a technical assistance request. Michelle, I think that next slide, please. So now we're going to step into our 1-year anniversary and be able to give you some of the details behind what we have done for the past year. Next slide, please. If you don't already know, during the 2024 Wyoming Funding Summit, we actually launched what was called the Wyoming Grants Connect Hub so that we could get people started on the process of identifying funding mechanisms that align with their community's priorities. Within 30 days of launching that tool, we launched what we call the Wyoming Grant Assistance Program. That program provides all of the support services that someone in a community or an organization would be able to need to be successful in their grant management lifecycle. We did this and we stood this up in response to the governor's grants management initiative, which Drew Palmer spoke about through the CARES Act and the ARPA program. We knew that some people needed some help writing grants, managing grants. So through that about $2 billion of funding, we said, let's turn around and let's help our own communities. And we were able to help do that through the Grants Management Initiative, and we continue to do that every day in our office. We really, really like our public service jobs. Both Diana and I have experience managing grants and reporting on grants. So know that you have a listening ear if you ever need to complain about anything. It's a struggle sometimes. We know this. That is why we are here, and we want to give you our utmost attention. Next slide, please. So over the past year, we have supported nearly 500 organizations across Wyoming. You can see some of the larger groups are the small businesses and the local governments. However, local governments, we use that as an all-encompassing term. So if there are water sewer districts, special hospital districts, conservation districts, that we label them as local governments. So that 145 number is inclusive of those entities as well. When we first launched the Wyoming Grant Assistance Program, we saw a very high number of small business requests. And what we did is we reached out to the Small Business Development Center and the Wyoming Business Council, and we continue to triage those requests that come in through our office. What we provide is something similar to what the Small Business Development Center can provide. However, their services and what they have to offer are much more aligned with Wyoming small businesses. And instead of recreating the wheel or duplicating services, we actually do what we call warm handoffs to the Small Business Development Center regional representatives. And they do the same for us. We shoot emails back and forth. We make sure that people get the assistance that they need whenever it comes to both of our supportive services that we have to offer. The Wyoming Business Council, they get wrangled in sometimes as well, especially if there's a new business that might be relocating to Wyoming and they're looking at what tax credits or incentives may be available to them, along with grant funding. And we always want to help support the notion of, federal stacking and braiding federal and state sources of funding is very critical for projects in Wyoming. So we are happy to report that, and we are happy to showcase that we had almost 500 technical assistance requests in 1 year. Next slide, please. When it comes to those almost 500 technical assistance requests, this is our monthly count of how many we received by month. You can see in July when we launched the program, we had about 65. We almost doubled it in the following month, which was August, and the number continues to get higher. I think we were at 491 as of last Thursday, July 3rd. We are very, very excited about this, and we continue to see an uptick in technical assistance requests as we are out in the communities promoting what the Grants Management Office has to offer. Next slide, please. So after some individuals have submitted a technical assistance request, sometimes some more questions get prompted by them. Am I doing the right activities? Is this the right exercise for me to perform at this time in the grants management lifecycle? Some things have started as, hey, what opportunities are out there whenever it comes to funding for, say, water, sewer, and then that tracks into another item, which is, oh, is there transportation dollars that need to be applied for. And then that tracks into more of the grant writing or the post award compliance technical assistance requests that we have received. We have led the delivery of 728 unique technical assistance services. That's almost two every day for the past year that we have done, if you want to put a number on it, on what we do in our office every day. We delivered more than 212 opportunity scans. And I'm going to say more than 212 because I think some went out the door last week and this week. So just want to be inclusive of those as well. Those opportunity scans, though, they take some time to develop. They are overwhelming. There's a lot of information on there. We understand that those documents are overwhelming, but one of the supportive services that we have to offer after receiving that opportunity scan is called a grant summary. And what that does is it gives you more detail behind that grant opportunity that was presented in the opportunity scan. Things like a NEPA review that would be required, or an eligibility status of a population that you are serving. We have also received some feedback or some traction where the governor's federal fund match, we referred them to those infrastructure matching funds. And that is a separate application process that is taken on by the governor's office, but there are still dollars available for that. So if you are still seeking an IIJA funded opportunity and you need some match dollars, please get in contact with us. We will send you the link, we'll send you the application, and we'll send you the contact person that you can speak to if you had any questions about that we were not able to answer. Next slide, please. When it comes to what we've done over the past year and trying to showcase some of our return on investment, one of the big hitting, heavy hitting items is how many grant applications were we able to help support in their development. And we are happy to report that 18 federal and state grant applications worth more than $43.6 million we assisted with in the past year. This actually includes the city of Lander, who I believe is present on the call today. They were able to receive some funding from the Mineral Royalty Grant Program underneath the Office of State Lands and Investments. We were also able to help the city of Green River successfully be awarded some funds from the Bureau of Reclamation. Congratulations to those two individuals. We have seen that it is quite hard to be able to receive an award, particularly with some of those more competitive grant applications. That's why we have our services here. We've also seen a lag time. There was about a 6 to 7 or 8 month lag time between the time that we assisted the city of Green River and the time that they are awarded. So please keep that in mind. I am always about the numbers. I'm a number person. I want to see the return on investment. Has it been a little longer than we expected? Yes. However, this is how we know that we are helping assist our Wyoming communities. It's okay that there's a lag. We know that there is. We will do anything that we can to help streamline that, and through the help of our federal partners. Next slide, please. Through the last year, we have actually served someone in every single county in the state of Wyoming, whether that be a city, a town, a nonprofit organization, a small business. And we are really excited to be able to report that. That means that our services and the communication of our services in and amongst community members is happening. We continue to have people reach out to us to present the grants management office and how we are able to support them. Next slide, please. Earlier in the presentation, I said we do not tell you what to do. We are really here to meet you at whatever level you are, even if it is you are a beginner grant writer or grant manager in your community and you are new at your job and you have no idea what's going on or where to start. We can help you. If you're a more seasoned grant writer or grant manager and you just want to make sure that your internal control documents are up to speed and they're speaking to the things that they are for your grant program, that's fine too. You need a quick QA QC review on your grant application before you submit it. That's fine with us as well. We will help you and we will meet you where you are at. That is why we provide individualized support through one-on-one consultations. We continue to have these virtual webinars. We continue to have stakeholder presentations. We will continue to have office hours as well this year. So we are really here to meet the need. And we have said time and time before, the services that we have are not an a la carte menu for a reason. It's what you need that we need to give you. And you should not be afraid to ask us because we have the tools and the resources in place to be able to meet your need. Next slide, please. We continue to foster networking opportunities. Some of these are through our own state agencies. We have a Grants Corps working group to help us maintenance some of the state opportunities that are out there right now on the Grants Connect Hub and highlight any technical assistance requests that are coming through our office. We don't like to recreate the wheel. We don't like to duplicate services. And we really do not like to redo something that another state agency has had to do or respond to. We don't want to usurp any state agency programs. However, those are the individuals that have the most amount of information when it comes to state agency programs. And if we need to tap into those resources, we absolutely do. We also have what Drew mentioned is our Wyoming Grants Coordination meeting with our state and federal partners. Our federal partners have told us that they are working diligently through the reviews of the IIJA programs against the current federal administration's priorities. They continue to provide us updates about upcoming opportunities that would be available for Wyoming communities. If you are interested in that meeting, please know you do not have to participate. You can just sit in and listen. And even if you don't want to sit in on the meeting, we have recap notes available on our state budget department website. So if you are interested in that and you just don't have the time in the day, you'd rather peruse some reading material, that is perfectly fine too. It will be available to you. We are also helping the Northern Arapaho and Eastern Shoshone tribes prepare for their next tribal summit that I believe is going to be happening later in the summer. Last year, we had a very, very successful event with both tribes whenever it came to grant writing and grant management training. And that's our area of expertise. So we're excited to be able to do that again. And last but not least, one of the biggest events is the Funding Summit. We supported the 2024 Wyoming Funding Summit that was co-hosted by Governor Gordon and Senators Barrasso and Lummis. And then Senator Lummis's office actually came to us and requested that we help organize the 2025 Wyoming Funding Summit. So we were able to stand that up this year. We were very, very excited. We had it in Riverton again. We have some of the material available online, as well as some of the webinars, or not webinars, but some of the breakout sessions that were recorded in regard to water sewer infrastructure, transportation, etc. Very, very excited. We had a lot of opportunities to network with several different Wyoming communities, and we're excited about that. Next slide, please. Oh, this is the best slide, actually. It's the picture of the grant training class. We had such a great turnout for the grant training at the 2025 Wyoming Funding Summit. We had a limited number of seats. We actually had a wait list. Some people on the wait list were not able to receive a seat at the training, which is what is helping facilitate some of the regionalized training events that we are looking to have here. The 2 days of intensive grant writing and grant management training was followed by 2 days of networking and fireside chat discussions with both federal and state agency participants. This was one of the best training events I think that we have had so far. A lot of people were excited. A lot of people were able to communicate with other communities in the state of Wyoming that they had not already been able to do so with. And we received excellent feedback. We are always looking to shape and hone the grant training material through our time as an office. And this is just another opportunity for us to receive feedback and be able to create better materials and mold them and shape them to what the communities or the participants would like to have us offer. If you have any feedback and you have not already provided that to us, feel free to shoot us a message. We want to incorporate everyone's feedback in this. Next slide, please. Some other items looking forward to help support the development of long-term planning and funding strategies. Last year, the governor himself called Drew Palmer and said, "Hey, I need to put in a technical assistance request for the wildfires," and we jumped on it. We have 3 different phases of the wildfire response and recovery. We continue to maintenance this. There is documentation available on the State Budget Department website. We are actually in the works of providing a phase 3 report on that website. We were invited to participate in some dialogue with the EPA and some of the programs that were funded underneath of the EPA. And we provided them just a small document about, hey, this is what we believe could be more beneficial to the state of Wyoming. One of those items was helping the federal partners and federal government understand that the state of Wyoming isn't really in a rural definition. We're in more of a frontier definition. It's 80 to 100 miles sometimes between towns or more. There are not any gas stations. Our economics of our state are much different than those on the East Coast. And we want to help the federal government identify that and understand that. We also have very, very small towns. So does the state of Montana. And we believe that there should be a more streamlined approach for smaller towns whenever it comes to things like water, sewer infrastructure, or some of the other programs that are out there. It is a very large burden when you have to create or plan for a water sewer project and you only have 25 people as a population in your town. You are very limited in the amount of funding that you can fundraise for or provide as match for a federal program. So we were able to provide comments on that as well. Next slide, please. All of this is leading up to, this is how we're supporting long-term capacity building. We're developing materials. We're utilizing the feedback that we receive in these webinars and in these grant trainings, and we are creating templates and resources. Some of those we launched and showcased at the Wyoming Funding Summit. They included the grant fit assessment, the grant readiness rubric, the post-award grants management compliance checklist, which is a big one. You get those dollars and then all of the work starts. We are continuing to develop those tools. We're also trying to focus on some of the tools that we can provide our own state agencies to help support or fill in some of the gaps that they are experiencing whenever they are also working at a capacity deficit. If you're interested in any of these tools, again, reach out, spd-grants@wyo.gov. And we are also going to be going through, it's not listed on here today, but the project prioritization tool. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, we're going to continue to build that capacity at the state, local, or organizational level. We want to increase the access to information through our Grants Connect Hub. You heard Drew talk about the big, beautiful bill. We'll continue to monitor the situation, and if there's programs that are available to Wyoming communities, you will find them on the Grants Connect Hub. We continue to try to foster some collaboration amongst federal, state, and local stakeholders. We have a lot of important things going on in Wyoming right now. One of them is affordable housing. Another one's water sewer infrastructure. Another one is the need for planning. We're always looking to engage with new stakeholders and bring them underneath of the umbrella of the Grants Management Office and the overall Grants Management Initiative. This is also coming to say we want to create ways to receive additional feedback. And we want to use that feedback to help support the Wyoming communities. I know that one of the things that we always say is, hey, the services that we have to offer are a reflection of what is needed in the community. And that is still a true statement. And that's all that we will ever provide to you. If you need something, please feel free to come to our office and request it. If we are not able to meet the need, we're pulling in the other stakeholders like our Wyoming Department of Transportation or subject matter experts so that we can be able to assist you. With that, we are going to kick off the project planning portion of the webinar today, and I am going to hand it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Christine, and hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Knobloch. I'll be leading us in addition to my team member, Michelle, and then Jessica will be joining us as well to carry us through the rest of today's presentation focused on project planning. And within the project planning discussion, looking at getting your projects, your organizations ready to go out and apply for federal funding, for state funding, for local funding, whatever funding you might be interested in applying for. Project planning is the place to start. Abby, you can move to the next slide. So Christine provided an introduction to some of our project planning services. Our goal here is to help you all position your projects so that when a grant is made available, you're ready. Because as you all likely know, and if you don't know, once a notice of funding opportunity is published, you often have between 30 and 60 days to submit your application. So that isn't the time to start building a project, to start networking, to start thinking about your goals, your objectives, to getting budgets. Planning happens now. That way you're ready when that funding opportunity comes out. And that's where we come in, and that's where we can help. We have, as Christine introduced, developed a lot of tools to help you all with project planning. We've built a project prioritization tool, which we'll walk through shortly, in addition to a project planning worksheet, and then a project design and documentation form. And together, all of these tools can help you all think about what your projects might look like, what your funding gaps are, what your stakeholder gaps are, and then get you ready to go out and pursue grants as they're made available. Christine also mentioned that we are available for one-on-one meetings as you're working through your project planning efforts. If you're working through your project prioritization tool, or you've completed your project planning worksheet, or you've started to document your project design in that form, shoot us an email. We're happy to walk through the document with you, workshop any issues, think about estimates or some of the other components that go into project design, like building a work plan. We're here. So shoot us an email. We're happy to hop on a call. We're just one email away. And then this is the team that you see here who will be seeing all of those emails. So reach out to us. We're here to help. Next slide, please. All right, the project prioritization tool. This is personally one of my favorite tools here. It's an interactive spreadsheet that you can download on our website, and I did see that we shared the link to that website. With this tool, you'll enter data about your project, and I know it's kind of hard to see here in the way that it's presented, but you will enter all of the criteria that you would consider for determining which project you might want to pursue, because I know in working with a lot of you that you have a lot of projects in the pipeline. You have a lot of community needs that you're hoping to address. You have a lot of organizational growth goals, and it can be hard to figure out, well, where do I start? I have a budget that I have. What can I prioritize? What grant should I prioritize? So this helps you figure out, with all of the projects that you might have right now, which one should you really focus on so that you can really figure out what your grant funding strategy is going to be based on what you want to prioritize. Do you want to prioritize the projects that you can implement quickly? Do you want to prioritize the projects that will have the smallest impact maybe on the funding that you have available? So you get to decide with the weights what's most important to you, to your organization, to your stakeholders, to help you come up with a strategy for funding your projects. In the next slide, we have our project planning worksheet, and this is the worksheet we will walk through together today. This is, so I'll only spend a few moments here since we'll have more time with it later on, but it's a worksheet that we developed to help folks have kind of a tactical planning approach to figuring out what their project design is, and more importantly, for a lot of the work that you do with the Grants Management Office, what the gaps are, what the funding gaps are, what the design gaps are, what the budget gaps are, what the work plan and timeline gaps are, because that's where we can help fill in, help you design, help you network, find partners, find resources to help you move those projects forward. Next slide. And then we have a project design and documentation form. This is a form that you all can download and use to help create a central reference for projects that you're currently funding. This is a helpful guide for you to document all of the information that's important for record keeping, that's important for reporting, that's important for getting audit ready, so that you can have all of that data stored in one centralized place. So this is where you can include information on the federal program information and any identifiers, on your contractors, on your subrecipients, on the budget, on the eligible activities. So this contains everything and gives you a central guide for your internal management team and for all of your stakeholders, so that everyone's aligned on what this project is and sometimes what it isn't as you continue to implement the program. All right, with that, we'll move into project planning. You can go to the next slide, Abby. Before jumping in, we'll launch a quick poll just to get a sense of what your roles are here for the folks who've joined us live related to planning. I'll give you all a moment to respond to this poll. Okay. Hope you all have had the opportunity to enter your selection. Let's see. Oh, we have a good mix today. Okay, so maybe a quarter of you are heavily involved in planning. It looks like about half are at least involved in planning. Maybe you support a couple of projects here and there, and then another quarter aren't very much so involved in planning efforts. So that's a good mix. Thank you for responding. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to at least spend a moment talking about our new technical assistance request form. If you submitted a request to our office a year ago and you submit a new one today, you'll see that our form has changed a bit. If you are submitting a technical assistance request for project planning support or grant research support, you want to know what funding is out there, you'll see that we now have more questions to give our team a better understanding of the status of your project. That way we have more information about what grants and programs would be most helpful for you to help move those projects forward. So when we're looking at what would be helpful to know about your project, you'll see that there are questions about the status of your project, about the timeline for your project. Is this already underway? Is it something you're hoping to kick off in the next year? Is this more of a vision, a dream of something you'd like to do in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you have estimated costs? And do you know what your existing funding sources are or any funding gaps? And then do you have any project plans? This is the information that we can then use to work with you on an opportunity scan that Christine mentioned, which is where our team will go deep into grants.gov, we'll go into the Grants Connect hub, we'll go onto federal agency websites, and we will see if there are any funding sources that align with your project. And this information is helpful because if we have a clear understanding of the exact activities they are hoping to fund, the exact funding gap, is it 10,000 or 5 million? That gives us a better understanding of the funding type that would be helpful for your project. Is this a major federal infrastructure grant that we should be looking for, or is this more, a private grant? You just have a few operational needs. Maybe you're looking for staffing, that sort of thing. So that information helps us take our grant researchers down the right path. And it will also help you have a better understanding of where your project stands and the steps that might make sense for you to continue to move that project forward. Next slide. And oftentimes when we receive technical assistance requests, folks are selecting that their projects are in the concept stage, and that's very common to have a project in the concept stage. You maybe have a sense of what the need is, or you've started to talk to stakeholders and you know that you need to do this bridge construction project, or you know that you'd like to implement a food insecurity program, but it hasn't quite been designed to the point where you could share a project plan with us. And so for the next few minutes, we'll be talking about what it means to take a project from that concept stage to the planning stage. You can go to the next slide. And And really, unless you are applying for planning dollars, and if that's the case, then you can forget all of this. You're applying for funding to develop that plan. And if you are interested in looking for planning grants, you can submit a request and we're happy to do that for you. But if you are interested in applying for implementation funding, which is the vast majority of the funding that's available currently, a funder is going to want to see that your projects are ready, that you have a clear timeline, you have a clear budget, you have staff who are ready, who are trained, who have experience, that you have clear milestones and activities that you're tracking with performance objectives and outcomes. So if those pieces are still under development, grant research might not be the most valuable next step for you. And that's where we come in to help you all with project planning, because once those pieces come together, we can start to help you all with a couple of things. One, unlock funding opportunities, which we'll talk about in a moment. Two, once you have a strong project design, that's when you can start to work with your partners and get approvals, talk about who might need to be involved, who should have a seat at the table, who's most impacted if this project is or isn't implemented. It's also important to help strengthen your approach to grant applications. And then it can also inform other resource strategies and project plans as you start to move that project from something that's more of an idea to something that is in writing and it's actionable. And the spotlight here is around this concept that we often refer to as network mapping. You may be familiar with it, you may not be familiar with it, but it's really a tool for you if you're sitting down and you're thinking about a project to start to identify and organize the partners and stakeholders that are involved in that project or impacted by that project. So to turn that into a verb, network mapping is the process of identifying who the current stakeholders are, who your current partners are, who should be invited to the table, and how can they maybe strengthen or expand the impact and reach of this project that you're hoping to fund. Next slide, thank you. So how to do network mapping? Well, what we often do when we're working with folks on network mapping is we sit down either with a project plan or with a list of activities and milestones and everything that they're hoping to achieve, or sometimes with a budget if they have that. And we ask ourselves and we ask the folks that we're working with, well, who's involved in this project currently? Who's involved? Who are you working with? Who are you meeting with? Who's guided the project up to this point? And then who should be involved, depending on what you're hoping to achieve, depending on who might need to be involved to actually make it happen. And then we talk about, well, who will be responsible for implementing this scope of work? Sometimes that isn't a part of the initial conversation. I was recently a part of a discussion with a team who manages senior services and aging services, and they wanted to implement a program that would increase access to broadband services. But that office can't go out and manage a broadband project. They realized they needed to talk to the team members who would do that. Or if they wanted to make transportation improvements, say make sidewalks safer, well, that's transportation. So trying to figure out who might actually be responsible for implementing this scope of work, who might have the budget capacity to implement that scope of work, that's an important part of the project planning discussion. And then also thinking about who might be impacted by the scope of work. Is it impacting businesses? Is it going to impact our residents? Is it going to impact our direct community, or will we see more of a regional impact? Because that will help you frame how you engage your stakeholders, which stakeholders should be engaged. It might also help you think about potential data sources for a project. Now you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So here's an example of a network map that we worked on with one of the communities. And this was a town that was interested in launching a food delivery program that provides older residents with access to fresh, nutritious meals from farmers and ranchers in the area. And so in looking at all the project activities, this is just a small sample of all the activities that were a part of this program. We mapped all of the stakeholders that would be involved for each activity, who would ultimately be responsible for making that activity happen, and then who's impacted. So that first activity, identifying which vendors might participate in the program, which producers might participate in this program. They realized that the town's community services office will be involved in that, but also perhaps our local businesses, our local agriculture businesses, maybe the economic development office would be involved to try to incentivize participation. Maybe they have an existing program that aligns with this. The Wyoming Department of Agriculture might also be a potential partner in this, as well as the Small Business Support Network in Wyoming, including the Wyoming Business Council. And then looking at responsible party, this office knows that they'll be managing the program. And then ultimately, the group that will see the greatest impact from this will be the businesses that benefit from participating or are interested in participating. And then going down to actually preparing and packaging the meals, well, that's a different component here. So the office knew that they would be involved, but they were also wondering, well, who might actually put all of these meal packages together, similar to your HelloFresh Blue Apron type delivery service? Who's going to put all this together in a box that we can then deliver? Maybe our workforce development offices might be involved. Maybe this is more of a training opportunity or workforce opportunity. Perhaps the community college would be involved. Maybe there's a culinary program that we could tap into to have this kind of be a branch for. We've also seen a lot of local correctional centers being involved in food insecurity programs across the country. So maybe our local correctional center. And then maybe the senior centers directly would want to be involved in preparing the meals, putting the boxes together, coordinating some of those delivery efforts. So just trying to figure out, well, who might be involved? What could this program look like? And for every stakeholder that you add to the list, you could imagine then that the scope of the program, the type of program can grow and change, and that might lead to more funding opportunities coming in. We can go to the next slide where we have kind of the outcomes here. So in looking at network mapping, then you can see that by expanding the list of who's involved beyond maybe your organization, beyond the stakeholders that you typically interact with, you can see how that might help you all identify potential data sources. All of these stakeholders here in this scenario likely have data. The economic development teams, they likely have data. Jessica, I know you have lots of data. The Wyoming Department of Agriculture, they have data. State agencies have a lot of data that they have and that they might be able to share as you're starting to design your projects and think about applying for funding. Your businesses likely have a lot of data. The Business Support Network in Wyoming has great data. So all of these stakeholders, as you start to pull them into your project, start to think about how this might be beneficial to them, what's their return on investment, what's your return on investment, that can lead to a great data sharing moment. It can also lead to expansion opportunities. So if in this example, and through building maybe your stakeholder reach and your network, you learn that, well, there's another need here. In addition to making sure that our older residents have access to local fresh produce, maybe there's also a youth element here, and maybe we can partner with our local public schools and expand in that direction. Well, now you've unlocked funding opportunities for child development. And there's a lot of funding out there for that, for making sure that youth have access to healthy food. So that can help with some expansion opportunities and then expanding your grant application partner pool as well. And on the next slide, we have a real world example. And as we move into this real world example, I know, and you all know, that communities across the country and certainly in Wyoming have very real and critical mitigation projects in the pipeline, whether they're to protect communities, in this example, from flooding impacts. I know you all are working through wildfire impacts, winter weather impacts, and more. And a lot of these mitigation projects are often visionary, and they can be, as you know, quite expensive. And that's where we often see a true value of network mapping, to make sure that there are resources and that there is support in place to make these critical projects happen. So in this example here, we were working with the county's emergency management office. They were developing and they had been developing for many years, a flood mitigation project to address consistent flooding impacts along their main street. And if you were at our summit in April, you are familiar with this example, but it's another fantastic example of network mapping. And so with this county, They weren't able to apply for traditional mitigation funding that has been made available through FEMA because the project just couldn't meet the benefit cost analysis requirements. And if you aren't familiar with a BCA, you input all of your costs, and then you also try to quantify all of the benefits for this project. And the benefits have to be greater than the costs. And for this project, because of the size of the project, because it was going to impact the railroad, it was going to impact businesses, it was going to be a very costly project, they just weren't able to meet that BCA requirement. And so our job then was to work with them to figure out, well, are there alternative funding pathways? If this can't be a mitigation project because it simply is not going to meet the BCA requirements, what else could it be? And we facilitated with their team, with their partners, a network mapping exercise. We pulled down their budget, we looked at all of their activities, and we pulled out some elements that are related to transportation. They had to replace culverts to divert stormwater to try to reduce roadway flooding. There were also some business support elements. They needed to make sure that the local businesses and their historic storefronts had resources for preparedness measures to help protect those businesses along that main street from flood-related disruptions and impacts to the actual buildings. Next slide. After going through that exercise, the county decided, well, maybe we should reach out to the Department of Transportation if a part of this project is really a transportation project, and maybe we should reach out to our economic development partners to see if they might be interested in either contributing to this project or seeing how a flood mitigation project could benefit our businesses. And in doing that, there were a couple of really great outcomes. One, the traditional mitigation project that they'd had in their files for years was able to be rescoped to isolate those transportation components, which made it eligible for U.S. Department of Transportation funding. They were able to apply for RAISE funding, which is now BUILD funding, to try to pull additional resources into a project that wasn't fundable in the way that it was designed previously. They were also able to work with their economic development team, who had actually been capturing a lot of data on the impacts of flooding on businesses. And so had they not had that conversation with their economic development team, they would have never known that the businesses were capturing data. They were engaging with the businesses on the impacts of these storms on business closures, on staffing challenges, on parking limitations. There was a lot of data there that the county didn't know that they had. And now they integrate all of that data into their applications. They built a great relationship with both of those departments so that they can continue to fund this project, support this project outside of what was originally just a mitigation program. Okay, so I think that's just a good example of, what the benefit could be to thinking outside of sometimes, planning work can be pretty siloed, and then that can help move it forward. And I will say too, before the webinar, a small business reached out to the Grants Management Office just to ask what's the value of a business attending this webinar and thinking about project planning. So before moving into the needs assessment piece, did want to take a moment to talk about project planning as it relates to some of our for-profit audience members. The project planning aspects that we're discussing today, they aren't just for governments, they aren't just for the nonprofits in the community. It's just as relevant for small businesses. If you were to open the Wyoming Grants Connect Hub that Drew and Christine mentioned today, you would see that there are currently more than 70 funding opportunities that are open for for-profit entities. For example, the U.S. Department of Justice recently opened its Elder Justice Innovation Grant program. This is a program that's designed to support the development of new and innovative approaches to preventing adult maltreatment. It's open to all entity types, including small businesses. And so with a lot of this funding being open to businesses, to small businesses and larger businesses alike, having clearly defined expansion goals, business plans, project plans, networks with your local government partners, with your nonprofit partners, when those applications open, you'll be ready. And you can reach out to us and it won't be a scramble to get an application together, and you'll actually have the pieces that you need to go out and pursue that program expansion funding. Okay, thank you for the tangent. Wanted to make sure I shared that tidbit here. So sometimes looking at moving a project from concept to design, we often think about there being a need for a needs assessment. Sometimes you can assume a need, and if you attended our summit, you'll know that one of our favorite examples here is a local leader thinking that maybe to address a gap in childcare, we need to build another center. And then that local government went out and did a major needs assessment to see, well, is that the true need? Why are we seeing that parents are so frustrated with our childcare system? Is it that we don't have enough slots? Do we not have slots in the right area? Are our staff not trained? Are we not providing the right quality of childcare? What is it? That way they can use the funding they have to address the real need and maximize the resources that they have. So sometimes taking a project from concept to planning means doing a needs assessment, talking to your community, talking to your stakeholders, figuring out what the real needs are, what data do you have to back up those needs so that you can apply for funding and say that we have a very clear design based on data. It's also important at this moment as you're starting to move from concept to planning to make sure that you have leadership and stakeholder buy-in. It can be difficult when that funding opportunity comes out to then reach out and see if you have approval to implement this project. You'll want to make sure you're having those approval and design discussions well in advance of any grant application being published. Next slide, thank you. This process also involves building a scope of work. Oftentimes when we're working with folks, they have broad ideas about what a project aims to accomplish, but they don't have a clear scope of work. They don't have measurable goals. They don't have outcomes yet. And once you've defined that, and we'll walk through an example of what that can look like in the project planning worksheet, you then have the information you need to connect all of those activities and clear goals to funding opportunities. That will also help you identify any constraints and any dependencies that might impact your ability to make this project happen, whether that's a staffing constraint, training, resources, timing. That's all a part of this scope development work. Similar, a work plan. As a project manager, I live and breathe work plans, but that isn't always the coolest part of building a project. But this allows you to think about the timeline for your project and any key milestones and dependencies associated with achieving that project. If you ever have questions about what project work plans can look like, reach out to the Grants Management Office, and we're happy to share some examples with you for what it could look like to assign roles and responsibilities to make sure that you have a clear work plan for what this project is going to look like so that you're really positioned to go after a federal grant. And then budgets. So what we often see too when we receive technical assistance requests is that you often don't have cost estimates. You have a range maybe, and that can be very helpful, but a good part of the process from moving to concept to planning is estimating what this might cost, whether that's labor, equipment, purchasing property, your indirect costs, your programming costs. Identifying what it might cost will help us better understand what the gap is so that we can find the best resources for you. I mentioned that at the top, but is it a $10,000 gap or a $5 million gap? Because that will yield a different funding opportunity as a part of our grant research process. Next slide. Well, where do I start? And Michelle, this might be when I turn it over to you. I apologize, I don't have my piece up here, but we will be going through a project planning worksheet with you all, as I mentioned at the front half of this presentation, to think about actually designing the project, gathering the data that you need to demonstrate the need for the project, building your logic model for the project so that you all have a competitive design ready when that application opens. Michelle, if I was correct in my timing, I will now pass it over to you to introduce our project planning worksheet and our case study for today.
Awesome, thank you, Rachel. Let me switch screens here and share this. instead of the PowerPoint. All right, can you all see that? Thank you. You probably can. All right, so I'll do a brief overview of the project planning worksheet that we've discussed today. And the GMO, we developed this for the funding summit. So those of you that attended the summit will have seen this already and maybe used it. So for those of you that haven't attended the summit or used these tools yet, we'll kind of walk through what this looks like and how you can download this tool from our website and use it starting today. So this worksheet is really designed to help communities and organizations such as yourselves apply a really tactical planning approach to developing clear, data-driven, and needs-based plans for your priority projects. So by outlining and strengthening, by outlining your project needs and actionable steps through this worksheet, this tool really supports strategic alignment of your projects and strengthens your readiness to apply for federal, state, and local funding opportunities. So we're just going to walk through this form step by step. So the first item, project name, seems easy enough, but actually creating a descriptive name for your project is important. This typically may include a location or the general purpose for the project. It doesn't have to be snappy, at the first time putting it together, but maybe a working name. And then as you go through this, you may refine the name of the project, but the name of your project kind of helps describe what you're doing and why you're doing it. The project lead, this could be a person or an organization. That will be the designated contact and expert on all details of the project. This person will also be in charge of ensuring that your project stays on track. For a project description, this is where you would provide this overview of your project, including details such as the location, major goals, what the anticipated outcomes will be. This description should be succinct, but also specific enough that the reader would know exactly what your project entails if they just skipped through the rest of this form. So if they read this one item, they would know exactly what you're doing for your project. And then these 4 boxes here are really about the cost and funding sources. So the total estimated cost is really the all-inclusive cost for your project, including direct and indirect costs. And this requires a detailed budget that accounts for everything from labor to overhead. So this is the full cost of the project. And then to the right of that, you have the funding gap. So this is the amount of money that you anticipate requesting in future grant applications. And it's the amount that your organization can't cover currently through existing funding sources. So this is really important for us in the GMO when you're saying, oh, I need to identify funding. I need funding for this. Like Rachel mentioned, well, what is the gap? What have you already done so that we can understand what we're working with? And then you can list the actually more granular existing funding sources and potential funding sources. So this is where you would provide the additional context into the existing funding sources you have, such as any grants you've already received, donations, fundraising, general funds, whatever you're looking at for your existing funding sources. Having a good picture, especially if you're grading or blending funds, we really want to see what's happening with the existing sources because that could actually impact your potential funding sources. There's certain federal grants that you can't overlap funds. You can't have duplication of benefits. So having us understand what you currently have can help dictate the potential funding sources that you're seeking. And then potential funding sources. So if you've already identified some funding sources that you found through your own searches, such as grants.gov, agency websites, foundation websites, etc., that's where you would list these. And once you have a project plan, you can also request technical assistance from the GMO, and we can help you identify some additional funding options for your projects. So all these resources so far are helpful for us in understanding what types of funding to look for. And then timeline. So this section really indicates how long you anticipate the project to take to accomplish the goals. So this will also require a detailed scope of work, listing, different project activities and their timeline for completion. And we want to be realistic here about timelines, right? We always think it can get done sooner than it can. So having a really realistic timeline here is important. Particularly because depending on grant funding timelines, they may have certain periods of performance. And if we think we can get something done by the end of 2026, is that realistic with the grant opportunity? Do we actually think we can get that work done in that timeline? Particularly if we're, doing construction or getting contractors, that kind of thing. All right, and then project need. So the need statement and community engagement is the next section of the form. So a concise summary of the need that this project addresses. So for example, we can't just say, oh, we're having flooding issues. We need to say exactly what's happening. So it should be very specific and describe the outcomes and the impact of what this need is. And then supporting data to back that up. So this is a really important part of the process in developing a needs statement as well. So gathering existing planning documents, other data sources, such as census data, environmental data, property data, whatever data you have access to support that need in your community so that you can say, hey, this really is a need and the data shows it. And if we don't have the data, where could we potentially go to get that data to demonstrate the need? And then consequences of an action. So this is very important as well. So describing what will happen if this project does not receive funding. So the impacts of that, real hard impacts. We can't just say, oh, it'll be bad. What is the impact if this need is not met? And so, like I mentioned, these first 3 boxes at the top here of this section really help frame the need statement for your grant application, which really tells the funder what the issue is and why it needs to be addressed and why this funding is absolutely necessary to make that happen. And then stakeholders and partners, we kind of move into community engagement here. For stakeholders on the left side, you list the individuals or groups that are directly impacted by or involved in your project. And then this is where that network mapping really comes into play that Rachel discussed, and it'll be really helpful. So there may be stakeholders that you need to engage with that you haven't previously, and identifying them here will help you identify what those next steps could be for engaging those stakeholders if you haven't already engaged with them. And then on the other side, for partners, identifying partners that have already provided buy-in, as well as partners that you plan to engage for your project. And their specific roles within the project. So unlike stakeholders, partners are more specifically directly involved in implementing your project in some way. So that's kind of the difference between stakeholders and partners there. And then community engagement. This is where you'll want to document any community engagement that you've already done, as well as community engagement that you plan to do as a part of the project. So this is very important. Federal funders especially want to see how your communities have played a role in developing and implementing a solution that meets their identified need. So community engagement, absolutely critical to documenting this as a part of your project plan. And then barriers. So identifying and creating plans for potential barriers is always a good thing to do as soon as possible in your project. We're all going to have hiccups on projects. They're not going to be perfect. We'll put together a plan and it's just not going to go to plan, right? That's project management. So this really demonstrates to funders that you're serious and realistic about how projects will be implemented, and that you've really thought through it proactively and are ready to address potential barriers. So these can include things such as securing permits, getting necessary approvals, coordination again amongst many parties, as well as maybe some timelines associated with procurement, for example, so that you're kind of anticipating barriers for the project. All right, and then goals and activities. We'll go down to the last section of the form. So this is where you can kind of start documenting kind of like your logic model. So this format that we've provided here is a great breakdown for developing your goals and associated objectives, activities, and metrics. So for your goals, you'll want to develop clear goals and avoid being too broad. So for example, if you're implementing a transportation project, instead of saying something like, we're going to improve transportation in our town, you could say improving access to safe pedestrian and cycling infrastructure in our town. So exactly what you're trying to do. And then for objectives, this is where your SMART objectives come into play. So you kind of break down that goal into exactly what you're doing. And using these sections will help you, workshop these SMART goals. So you may realize that you have most of the goal developed, but you might need to identify how you will address maybe one of the SMART elements. So for example, you may feel confident that your goal is specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant, but because you need to procure a contractor to perform the work, we know that can take a while, you might not be so sure about the time-bound part of your goal. So really breaking down these goals into all 5 of the elements of the SMART can be really helpful in helping you kind of frame your plan. And then this is a great time to meet with relevant stakeholders to really think critically about how this project could be implemented. And then for activities, these are the specific actions and steps that you're going to take to achieve your objective. So, this is the actual project work. You're actually performing the work. So being really specific with this will help you create a realistic budget, kind of as Rachel mentioned. So building out a work plan with activities and a budget that aligns with that work plan, it's really an iterative process, as you guys know. So you may have a ballpark idea for your budget that you're starting with, but then you start listing your activities, saying, oh, we're going to do all these things, and you realize, oh, we're doing way too many activities for this budget. This is absolutely not realistic. And then you kind of go back and forth, and it's an iterative process, and vice versa. You may start with your activities and say, okay, it kind of rolls up into this budget. Ooh, that's a lot higher of a number than we realized. So this is a great process to kind of go through as you're working on your budget. And then lastly, metrics. So these are the specific data points that you'll use to measure and track success. So some may be like response rates to surveys or participation rates. That's like one example. Sometimes these are called indicators, performance measures, or targets. So using the data sources you identified earlier in the project planning process can kind of help you as a starting point to assess how you could measure success for this project. And there might be standard data points you can use to measure success that are out there that are just widely known. This is how we'll measure success for this project. We built the road. It's a safe street. But there may be some that are not so clear. So you might need to create your own or identify new metrics. And this is really important because, as we're planning projects, implementing projects, we know that project success is really no longer just about meeting scope and budget and timeline goals. It's really broadened since that original sort of piece. It's really about delivering value. So how can we measure that value delivered to our projects? All right, and I will stop sharing, Abby, and I'll pass it, I think, back to you, Abby. We're going to move on to our lovely guest, Jessica, to talk about how she has used this tool in her work. All right, Jessica.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know if Abby was going or who was next. So this, I guess we use this project planning worksheet a little bit differently. I'll give you the history of this particular project. So PEP is an economic development organization, which means that we're involved in we're looking at a lot of different things to increase the viability of current industries, to create jobs, to support workforce. And so it ends up looking like a lot of different things. And so what we work in actually Powell, Wyoming, We primarily serve the Powell, Wyoming zip code 82435, but because we're in Park County of Wyoming, and we know kind of the economy is much larger than just the community of Powell, we work countywide and then often regionally. And for us, that's the Bighorn Basin region of Wyoming. So that includes Bighorn County, Park County, Washakie County, and Hot Springs. So just to give you an idea of like kind of a lot of times our projects really are for Powell, but because of the nature of our economy in the area, we have to make them a lot bigger to actually accomplish something. So, but this, I guess, to give you a little history on this project. So one of our industries in the area is agriculture. Another one is tourism, and it's often realized for Powell and like bolstering outdoor recreation is what we're really focusing on. And then also we work in, supporting the workforce. So this project that we've been looking at is really a way to kind of increase the viability of our agricultural industry in Park County. And so we've been looking at that very broad goal for, I don't know, as long as PEP has been in existence. So I think for my, current executive director, she estimated maybe like 15 years. We've been thinking about knowing we need to do this somehow. I would say though, it's been really in the last like maybe 3 years that we've had more dedicated time to the project. And especially, let's see, the second funding summit was April of 2024. That was when I first considered one of the grants that I'll talk about later. And I promise I'll bring the project planning worksheet. It'll be relevant. But basically, I looked at it last year as a potential opportunity for us, but we realized at the time we needed, we weren't there. We weren't really ready to apply for a grant. But I had looked at, and it was before the opportunity scan technical assistance help was available through the state. That was kind of like being developed. So I was just doing the manual work of looking at, grants for that. And so that's kind of how we realized, no, we don't have, this is it has great potential, this particular program, but we're not ready to do this. And so then we had, because we run the VISTA program, we actually dedicated one of our VISTAs to focusing on local food access. And it was with this goal of, increasing the viability of agriculture, trying to save ag land in our area, and then also connecting local producers to local consumers, whatever that looks like. We weren't really sure at the time. And so then we had this VISTA dedicated to 1 year of service from June 1st, we'll just say June 1st, arbitrarily 2024 through June 1st of 2025 through this year. And then during that process, she really accomplished a lot of these components of this project planning worksheet. So we didn't necessarily use the worksheet up front, but we had a conversation before she left, like her last week of service. I sat down with her as the grants manager, and then we also included our other VISTA who was focused on fundraising and grants, and we had a conversation. And essentially, we talked through all the components of this worksheet to see if, one, we were ready to apply for funding, if we had a solid idea of a project that we could actually use to submit for whatever kind of funding it was. And then if we did have a project, what type of project was it? And in our mind, we had to make a decision. Do we go for planning funding, or are we ready to actually apply for implementation funding? And so this is kind of the shortened version. We had a 2-hour conversation about it. But going through this, and some of this is generic, so I kind of use this worksheet in reverse just because I was asked to present at this meeting, but honestly, it covers all the information we talked through. So we had a generic name because we weren't exactly there yet. So that's why it's generic, although when we were actually deciding to write for a grant, that's when we developed a title for this project. But we really knew at that point from the conversation that this is what we were looking at. We were trying to create a pipeline for local food access, and not just up. So, and what that means is we have a lot of local food producers or local agricultural producers in our area, but very few of them are providing products for the local market. So, and they weren't, from the basic, from the basic thing where people don't even know who sells what, that's not even put out there. So we knew we had to work on this pipeline, but we had identified that, after, during her year of service, we identified that like really the largest kind of opportunity for our local producers was actually local institutional food buyers. Hospitals, our school district is a huge one, and that, but then ultimately restaurants, caterers, because they're buying food from all kinds of other sources all the time. But the hospitals and schools, you could really like plan out the year what they would need to buy, and that's actually what they did. So we specifically wanted to focus on local producers being connected to local institutional buyers because we knew that economically that would be the most helpful. So that's kind of where this idea came about. And so then in terms of the cost for this project, we actually didn't know. We really didn't know how much this would cost. I mean, ultimately, we knew we would have to build a building that probably had some sort of commercial kitchen that could actually do a lot of the middle things in the pipeline, which was, kind of from really the producers would produce the food and the products. And then from there, we knew they couldn't do any of the rest of it. So coming up with an entity that could aggregate orders, take orders, aggregate products, maybe transport them, package them according to regulations, process them if it was needed, et cetera, in order to get them to the institutional food buyers. So that was one of our clues that, okay, we don't even know how much this costs. Okay, probably it'll, that was one point towards a planning grant. And so I'll come back to how we arrived at this number, but basically, that the planning part would be part of identifying the total cost. The funding gap at the time, we didn't have any funding for this project. We did have a person, a Vista, that was dedicated to writing grants and fundraising for local food access projects, but she had just started. So we knew that we had the potential, which is, why we have it down here, but we didn't have any money that she had actually raised. Our other funding gap was because we're a low capacity organization, it's really staff time. So either we had to compensate, a part-time staff to work more hours to dedicate to this project, or we would need, to substitute a funding source for their hours, but we didn't have a full staff to dedicate to it. We were going to have to come up with a creative option, but most likely over a longer period of time versus a short period of time. The other thing that we knew we needed after a year of research was that we needed a way to an online ordering system, because we knew from institutional food buyers that that's the way they worked and that's what they needed to actually purchase food locally. So that's where
Jessica,
yeah.
this is cool. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. So it appears as though we're going a little late. Stay on because you're going to finish your presentation. I just want to respect and recognize everybody's time, that it is going to be 11:30. We so appreciate that you joined us today. For those of you that can stay on, we will finish the presentation and the recording. Everything will be posted on our website. And if you've got more questions, do not hesitate to reach us at the Grants Management Office, and we will do our best to try to respond and find the answers that you need. So thank you so much for joining us. For those that can stay on, please do. And Jessica, I'm going to turn it back over to you to finish your presentation.
Okay. Well, thanks, Drew. And yeah, I'll go through this a lot faster. I'm sorry, I didn't realize how much I had to talk through.
It wasn't you. There was so much information and material
Okay.
that we underestimated the time that it would take us to get through this. So please
Okay.
take your time and finish your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, Jessica, please take your time
Thanks.
because your perspective on utilizing this tool is valuable for other people on the call.
Okay, thanks. And I guess so anyway, I guess my point is, we knew that we didn't have this. And so that was why we started looking at funding sources way early on, even before we had done the research. And then the project needs came out basically from the year the Vista spending a year on this project. That's where these came from. We were able to outline these a lot more clearly. Same with the data. I think one of the hardest things with at least the projects we deal with, and it might be the same for a lot of you, is that we are arguing for something that we need that doesn't exist. And so finding data to actually support, like, okay, obviously, I don't know how to explain it, like the absence of something and filling that gap is super challenging for us. And although there is data out there, it's not all in the same place. And we have to kind of be creative about what kind of data we use. So one of the things we've learned with this particular grant, or like actually not just this grant, but other projects, is especially those that say, okay, we prioritize, low income populations or poverty, areas of deep or persistent poverty, that's some of the language that's out there. We can't do that. So the Powell, Wyoming, even though it's a very large like geographic area, it actually is only one US Census tract. And that's a big problem for us. And that US census tract actually includes like half of our, county and doesn't actually show the range of kind of incomes that we have. And so one of the things that we actually went to, which is not actually on this list, but we've had to build sources of data that actually speaks to the absence of this and why we need local food access. This Agri Insights data came from our current executive director, basically saying, look, there's never been a report in Wyoming about agriculture, about the impacts of agriculture that actually includes all of it, all of this types of stuff. So she did work. I mean, this is way before we had the Vista, but she got the University of Wyoming Extension Office to actually do this study. And it's not the best, but it's the first of its kind, and it's now available for everybody to use. But that's where we had to start. The other thing with the US Census tract data, what we've started using is actually to show the need is to use like the number of students in our school district on the low or discounted meal program. So that doesn't actually talk about their poverty level, except that in order to be in that program, they have to have a certain income that's, low. And so that's what we've started using. So I guess that's what I would say about this is, yes, you collect this information, and maybe we didn't do a network mapping analysis, but like we just had to think differently about the problem and the need. Like, how can we show this need otherwise? Okay. And consequences of an action, really, I did it very like high level here, but essentially a lot of it it's observation. I mean, what happened during COVID and the years that followed was basically if something wasn't available locally, we couldn't get it for a long time. And that went not just for the food, different products in our grocery stores, because we don't have that many grocery stores, but it really was like a lot of different things. And so again, it's like, how do you show that this is a problem? I don't know, like more so than other areas. So yeah, for us, the whole need for local food access really comes to local food security, making sure we create that for our Bighorn Basin area. The stakeholders, this list has really just been developed, and I don't know why the bullets populated wrong, but it should be just one, starting at 1 and going down. But really our stakeholders list, we've known just because we've been working on this problem for a while. So this was very easy to come up with for us. We knew who they would be. The partners as well, like we've been partnering, gathering information, asking questions with, local producers for a really long time. And it's been more recently that we started working on the institutional food buyer end. But part of what the Vista did during her first year of service was she executed surveys. So she did a producer survey to really assess their kind of need for types of pipeline components, which were like, we define those as transportation, delivery, ordering, aggregation, processing, packaging, access to a commercial kitchen, that kind of stuff. And then also what they knew about kind of, food co-ops and food hubs, which we realized was very little actually. But she assessed their knowledge of also financial models on how to do this. So we did a survey with the producer side and then also on the consumer end. And so for a lot of these partners, we had a section in our survey that said, would you like more information or would you like to become further involved in this project? And so people self-selected yes or no. So then we suddenly, could generate some sort of a deeper contact list, that included everybody that we sent the survey to, but then also the people that responded who said, we want to be more involved in this project. The community engagement was the piece that kind of came later when we realized, okay, you know what, PEP can't be the main entity pushing this forward. It needs to be a group effort of multiple people who are maybe not doing this full time, but more consistently talking about this for across a longer timeline. And so that's where we came up with, okay, we need some sort of local food access committee. And that also came out of the Vista's year of research. The barriers we knew, again, because of her research and just her conversations and the surveys we executed. She also worked with the USDA to bring a free farm to school producer training to Powell, the first one we've ever been able to do. And the conversations, that we're doing during that training really helped us identify barriers and some things that we never thought about. And then when it came down to goals, you can, we didn't really outline these initially, but for the grant that we ended up applying for, we had to do this for the grant. So if you're able to do this before, it would really help you in that, to submit a grant for a project. But again, these are supposed to be, I don't know, the bullets were all connected for some reason on the worksheet, but this was supposed to be 1 through 6. But this is what, I just, for the sake of this exercise, I took one of the 4 objectives that we wrote into the grant we just submitted. And the main one was to convene a steering committee, and I broke it down by activities. And so, so you can just read over those. And then from those, the 2 metrics that I came were pretty straightforward. I tried to pick ones that were kind of obvious, but we decided that, we didn't want a ton of people involved in this committee because it's hard to wrangle. The more numbers you get, the higher the number of people, the harder it is to wrangle. And so we decided on 5 to 6 people for the committee members. And so that's where I came up with my target, but we had to get them to commit, to this process over the next 2 to 3 years, for just planning. And then we will execute our first steering committee meeting come October, with or without the grant funding. So that's where I had the target number of 1. So you could make this, obviously this is a more straightforward objective, but for other objectives, this is going to maybe help a lot more. And so I guess I'll just stop there. That's how I use the project planning worksheets. Yeah, after we had kind of knew what our funding opportunities were out there. Okay, so I'll stop there.
Jessica, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your tips and your successes and your challenges and how you put this into play. We truly appreciate it. And great job to our team from the Grants Management Office and our Haggerty Consulting team. A lot of information today. Obviously, we misjudged timing, so next time we will do a little bit better on that. Bottom line, we have the resources, capacity, and expertise to help you at any stage for free. So please use us. Please come to the Grants Management Office and ask your questions. We'll help you search for answers. Before I go ahead and conclude, Christine, do you have any last announcements that you want to talk about?
I have no announcements, but if you joined today's webinar and you have not received or requested a service from us, please keep us on your radar. We will be waiting to receive your request to be able to help you.
Wonderful, always. And this is the team. So if you're wondering, this is the team and you can get a hold of us. So on behalf of the governor and our team, we sincerely appreciate your time this morning. And we look forward to hearing from you and working with you on your individual projects in your communities across the state. Again, this recording, webinar, and the presentation slides will be posted on our website. We continue to be active in helping you find ways and to make our services valuable. So let's remain vigilant, working together to invest in Wyoming to promote stronger and more vibrant communities. Thank you for joining us today.